The sky turned black at noon. Eleanor Vance stood at her bakery window and watched the ships come down. There were hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They blocked out the twin suns of New Hearth and cast shadows across the entire city. The ships were massive and dark, shaped like the bodies of ancient serpents, and they moved through the clouds like living things. The Dracarin had finally come. Eleanor had heard stories about them her whole life. Everyone in the galaxy had. They were dragon people. The humans called them. They stood 3 meters tall, and their bodies were covered in scales harder than steel. They breathed plasma hot enough to melt stone. They had ruled their part of the galaxy for 12,000 years, and in all that time, no species had ever defeated them in war. Now they had come to New Hearth, and everyone knew what that meant. The emergency sirens had stopped hours ago. There was no point anymore. The Colonial Defense Fleet had tried to fight, and Eleanor had watched from her roof as the bright flashes of dying ships lit up the morning sky. Her son David had been on one of those ships. She did not know which flash had been his. The city was quiet now. People had stopped running. Some had hidden in their homes. Others had gathered in the streets to watch the end come. Eleanor had done neither. She had gone back to her bakery, turned on her ovens, and started making bread. It was a stupid thing to do. She knew that. The world was ending, and she was making bread. But her hands needed something to do, and this was the only thing she knew. Her husband Harold had built this bakery 40 years ago, brick by brick. He had made the stone oven himself. He had taught her how to bake in it, how to feel when the temperature was right, how to know when the bread was done just by the smell. Harold had died 3 years ago. A quiet death, in his sleep, holding her hand. Eleanor had kept the bakery open because it was all she had left of him. The smell of bread in the oven still reminded her of his laugh. She pulled a fresh loaf from the oven and set it on the cooling rack. The crust was perfect, golden brown, and crackling. Harold would have been proud. Outside, she heard the sound of heavy footsteps, many of them marching in perfect order. The Dracarin had landed. Eleanor wiped her hands on her apron and looked out the window again. They were coming down the main street. A whole column of them, moving like a river of black metal. Their scales caught what little light came through the ships above and threw it back in sharp flashes. They carried weapons she did not recognize, long poles that hummed with energy. Their eyes glowed like hot coals. At the front of the column walked the largest one Eleanor had ever seen. He was taller than the others by 1/2 meter, and his scales were not black but deep red, like dried blood. He wore no armor because he did not need any. A crown of twisted metal sat on his head, and his eyes burned brighter than all the rest. The Dragon King, Vorathan himself, the conqueror of 37 worlds. He had come to see his newest prize. Eleanor watched him walk down the street. The humans who had gathered outside fell back as he passed. Some dropped to their knees. Others simply stood frozen, unable to move. The Dragon King did not look at any of them. His eyes swept over the buildings and the people, like they were nothing more than furniture. Then he stopped. He was standing right outside her bakery. His great head turned, and his burning eyes fixed on the window, on the golden loaves cooling inside, on Eleanor herself. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Eleanor had expected to feel fear. She had expected her heart to pound and her hands to shake. She had lost her son today. She would probably lose her world tomorrow. A monster from the darkest stories of the galaxy was staring at her through her own window. But she did not feel fear. She felt something else. Something strange and quiet and completely unexpected. She felt sorry for him. She did not know where the feeling came from. Maybe it was the way he stood there, so tall and so terrible, surrounded by soldiers and power and death. He had everything in the galaxy, and yet something in his eyes looked empty, hungry, not for food or conquest, but for something he could not name. Something he had maybe never had. Eleanor had seen that look before. She had seen it in the eyes of lonely children who came into her shop, in the eyes of widows who ordered birthday cakes for people who would never eat them, in the eyes of soldiers who came home from war and did not know how to be people anymore. The Dragon King had conquered the galaxy, and he was still looking for something. Eleanor did not know what made her do it. Later, she would wonder if she had lost her mind in grief. But standing there, looking at the most powerful being she had ever seen, she did the only thing that felt right. She smiled at him. Not a fake smile or a scared smile. A real one. The kind she gave to every customer who walked through her door. The kind she had given to Harold every morning for 40 years. The Dragon King's eyes widened. Just a little. Just for a moment. Then his face went hard again, and he looked away. He said something to his generals in a language Eleanor did not understand, and the column began to move again. But as they marched away, the Dragon King looked back. Just once. Just for a second. Eleanor raised her hand in a small wave. Then he was gone, and the street was empty, and the sky was still black with ships. Eleanor turned back to her oven. There was more bread to make. The world might be ending, but people would still need to eat. That was what bakers did. They made food for whoever walked through the door, no matter who they were or what they had done. Even if that person was a dragon who had just killed her son. She did not know why she had smiled at him. She did not know what it meant or if it would change anything. But as she worked the dough with her tired old hands, she felt something she had not felt since David's ship had turned into light. She felt like herself again, and that, she decided, was worth more than fear. The napkin sat on Varathan's desk for 2 weeks. He looked at it every day. He did not know why. It was just a piece of cloth with flowers on the corners. His servants asked if they should throw it away, and he told them no. His generals asked what it was, and he did not answer. It sat there, white and simple and completely out of place in a room full of war maps and conquest plans. Then one morning, his attendant picked it up to clean the desk. The napkin unfolded in his hands, and he made a small sound of surprise. "My king," he said, "there is writing inside." Varathan's head turned sharply. "What? Writing? Human writing?" On the inside of the cloth, the king took the napkin from his attendant's hands. He unfolded it carefully, and there it was. Small letters written in dark ink on the white fabric. The handwriting was shaky, the letters uneven. The hand that wrote them had been old and tired, but the words were clear. Varathan read them slowly. His people had learned human language long ago, for the purpose of conquest. He knew every word. But knowing the words and understanding them were different things. The note said, "I know what you are. I know what you've done. I know what you'll do. My son died defending the outer colonies." His name was David. He was 42 years old. He loved to fly. When he was a boy, he would stand in the yard and watch ships cross the sky, and he would tell me that someday he would be up there. I told him to be careful. He told me not to worry. My daughter fled with her children to a refugee ship. Her name is Maria. She is 39. She has 2 little girls. I do not know where they went. I will probably never see them again. My husband died 3 years ago. His name was Harold. He built the bakery with his own hands. He built the oven I still use every day. He taught me how to make bread. He held my hand every night for 40 years, and on the last night, his hand was still warm. You have taken everything from me except one thing. You have taken my son and my daughter and my world. But you cannot take the choice of who I want to be. I choose to be kind, not because you deserve it. You do not. You killed my son. You drove away my daughter. You have done terrible things to people who never hurt you. I choose to be kind because I deserve it, because that is who I am. Because that is who humans are when we are at our best. We break, we grieve, we rage, and then we make honey cakes for dragons. You will rule us. You will take our work and our world and maybe our lives. But you will never take this from me. You will never take the fact that I looked a god of war in the eye and offered him sweetness. I win. Eleanor Vance Baker. Varathan read the note 7 times. The first time, he felt confusion. The words did not make sense. How could she win? He had all the power. He had all the ships and the soldiers and the weapons. She was just an old woman in a small shop. She had nothing. The second time, he felt anger. How dare she speak to him like this? How dare she claim victory when she was the one who had lost everything? It was an insult. It was madness. It was the desperate lie of a broken creature. The third time, he felt something else. Something he did not have a word for. The fourth time, he stopped reading and just stared at one line. I choose to be kind because I deserve it. Varathan had never heard anyone say anything like that. His people did not think about kindness. They thought about power and strength and dominance. They did not ask what they deserved. They took what they wanted. That was the way of the Dracarin. That was the way of kings. But Eleanor Vance, this old woman who had lost everything, did not think about what she could take. She thought about who she wanted to be. She thought about what she deserved. And she had decided that she deserved to be kind, even to the monster who had destroyed her family. The fifth time, Varathan noticed something else. She had told him the names. David, Maria, Harold. She had made them real. They were not just numbers in a conquest report. They were people. They had lived and loved and dreamed and he had ended them. The sixth time, Varathan felt something break inside him. Not a big break. A small one. A crack in something he had not known was there. The seventh time, he just sat there, holding the napkin, and thought about an old woman making bread in a shop her husband had built. He did not know what to do. He was a king. He was a conqueror. He had burned worlds and felt nothing. But now he felt something, and he did not know its name. His attendant was still standing there, waiting. Varathan looked at him and realized he did not want anyone else to see this note. It was his. It was private. It was between him and Eleanor Vance and no one else. "Leave me," he said. The attendant left. Varathan folded the napkin carefully and held it in his hands. It was just cloth, just words. But it was the heaviest thing he had ever carried. And he knew somehow that he would carry it for the rest of his life. Varathan had not stopped thinking about the old woman. This bothered him greatly. He had conquered 37 worlds. He had burned cities and broken armies and made kings kneel before him. He had done things that would make lesser beings go mad with horror, and he had done them without feeling anything at all. That was what it meant to be Dracarin. That was what it meant to be king. But he could not stop thinking about that smile. It had been 3 days since he landed on New Hearth. 3 days of meetings and orders and the boring work of conquest. His generals had divided up the territories. His soldiers had rounded up the leaders and the fighters. The human government had surrendered completely, as he knew they would. They had no choice. Everything was going exactly as planned. And yet Varathan found himself standing outside a small bakery on a corner street, watching an old woman through the window. She was making something. He did not know what. Her hands moved with a slowness that came from age, but also with a certainty that came from long practice. She did not look up. She did not seem to know or care that the conqueror of her world was standing 10 meters away. His generals stood behind him, confused and silent. They did not understand why the king had come here. Neither did Varathan, if he was honest. But he had learned long ago to follow his instincts, and his instincts had brought him to this door. He pushed it open and walked inside. A small bell rang above his head. It was a tiny sound, almost funny compared to the weight of his presence. The shop was warm and full of strange smells. Sweet things and grain things and something hot and dark that he could not identify. Glass cases lined the walls, filled with foods he had no names for. The old woman looked up from her work. Her face was calm. Her eyes were clear. "You came back," she said. Her voice was steady. "Not afraid. You know who I am." It was not a question. "You're the Dragon King, Varathan." She wiped her hands on her cloth. "I saw you on the news. Before the broadcast stopped, anyway. You smiled at me." "I did. Why?" The old woman tilted her head. She looked at him the way one might look at a puzzle, not at a monster. "Why does anyone smile?" "I was glad to see a customer." "I am not a customer. I am your conqueror." "You're standing in my bakery," she said simply. "That makes you a customer. Would you like something to eat?" Varathan did not know what to say. In his entire life, no one had ever spoken to him like this. Not his generals. Not his enemies. Not even his own mother, who had died when he was young and whom he barely remembered. Everyone spoke to him with fear or respect or hatred. No one spoke to him like he was just a person who had walked into a shop. "Your kind cannot eat what we eat," he said slowly. "No," the old woman agreed. "Your stomachs are different. I read about it once, a long time ago. You eat raw meat. You can digest things that would kill us." She shrugged. "But you've never tried what we make, have you?" "No. Then how do you know you won't like it?" She was already moving before he could answer. She walked to one of the glass cases and pulled out something small and round. It was golden brown, covered in a shiny glaze that caught the light. She set it on the counter between them. "It's called a honey cake," she said. "My grandmother's recipe. 4 generations of my family have made this. You offer food to your conqueror. I offer food to everyone who walks through my door." Her eyes met his. "That's what bakers do." Varathan stared at the honey cake. It was so small, so simple. A tiny thing made of flour and sugar and heat, sitting on a counter between a dragon king and an old woman who had no reason to be kind to him. "Your fleet," he said. "Your soldiers. They fought us. Yes, we destroyed them. I know." Her voice did not change. "My son was on one of those ships." Varathan felt something move in his chest. He did not know what it was. "You lost your son, and you offer me food." "Yes. Why? Do you not hate me?" The old woman was quiet for a moment. She reached under the counter and pulled out a cloth napkin, white with small flowers on the corners. She set it beside the honey cake. "Hate is heavy," she said finally. "I carried it once after my husband died. It didn't help anything. It just made me tired." She looked at him with those clear, calm eyes. "I'm 81 years old. I don't have enough time left to waste on hate." "Then what do you feel when you look at me?" She smiled. It was the same smile from the window, warm and real and completely without fear. "I feel curious," she said. "I've never met a dragon before." Varathan did not take the honey cake. He did not know what to do with it. But when he left the bakery, he took the napkin. He folded it carefully and put it inside his armor, close to his chest. His generals asked why he had gone in. He did not answer. That night, alone in his chambers on the flagship, he unfolded the napkin and looked at it for a long time. It was just a piece of cloth. It meant nothing. It was worthless. But he kept it anyway, and when he finally slept, he dreamed of warm bread and an old woman's smile. And for the first time in 100 years, his dreams were not filled with fire. Varathan went back to the bakery. He did not tell anyone where he was going. He did not bring his generals or his guards. He walked alone through the streets of the conquered city, his red scales catching the light of the twin suns that shone again now that the fleet had moved into orbit. People stopped and stared as he passed. Some ran, others froze. But he did not look at any of them. He only wanted to see Eleanor. The bell rang when he pushed open the door. She was there, as he knew she would be. She was pulling a tray of small golden rolls from the oven, and the smell filled the tiny shop like something alive. She looked up at him and nodded, like he was an old friend stopping by for a visit. "You found my note," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "And you came back." "Yes." She set the tray down and wiped her hands on her apron. Her movements were slow and careful. Her hands were shaking a little. He noticed now how thin she was, how the skin on her arms hung loose, how her shoulders bent forward with the weight of years that she was dying. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. Humans did not live long. He had known this, but he had not really understood it until now. "Sit down," she said, pointing to a small table by the window. "You're too tall. My neck hurts looking up at you." Vorathan sat. The chair was much too small for him, but he folded his body into it as best he could. Eleanor brought 2 cups to the table. One was small, filled with dark liquid. The other was larger, filled with water. "Coffee," she said, pointing to the small cup. "You can't drink it, but you can smell it. And water for you. I figured your kind must drink something." Vorathan took the water cup in his clawed hands. It looked tiny, like a toy, but he drank from it anyway, because she had offered it. "Why did you write that note?" he asked. Eleanor sat down across from him. She wrapped her old hands around the coffee cup and breathed in the steam. "Because I needed to say it. Because I needed you to know." "To know what?" "That you didn't win." "Not really. Not the part that matters." Vorathan shook his head. "I do not understand. I have your world. I have your people. Your son is dead. Your daughter is gone. What is left for you to win?" Eleanor smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was still warm. "You've never had anyone love you, have you?" The question hit him like a blow. He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came out. He tried to think of someone who had loved him. His mother had died when he was young. His father had trained him for war. His people respected him and feared him, but love? That was not a word his kind used. "I thought so," Eleanor said softly. "I could see it in your eyes. That first day, through the window. You have everything in the galaxy, and you're still hungry, still empty." "We do not need love," Vorathan said. But his voice sounded strange to his own ears. "We are Dracarin. We are beyond such things. No one is beyond such things." Eleanor took a sip of her coffee. "I've lived a long time. I've seen a lot of people. Rich people, poor people, powerful people, weak people. And I'll tell you something I've learned. Everyone needs to be loved. Everyone needs to belong to someone. The ones who say they don't are usually the ones who need it most." Vorathan was quiet for a long time. The words sat in his chest, heavy and uncomfortable. He wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that his people had evolved past such weakness, that he was a king, and kings did not need anything. But he could not, because somewhere deep inside him, in that place where the crack had formed, he knew she was right. "Tell me about your husband," he said finally. Eleanor's eyes lit up. It was a small light, soft and warm, but it changed her whole face. "Harold? Oh, Harold was wonderful. He was stubborn as a rock, and he couldn't cook anything except toast, but he was wonderful." She laughed, and the sound was like music. "We met when we were 20. I was working in my mother's bakery, and he came in to buy bread. He came back every day for a month. Finally, I asked him why, and he said it was because I had the prettiest hands he'd ever seen." "Your hands?" I know, strange thing to notice. But that was Harold. He noticed things other people missed. She looked down at her hands, old and wrinkled and spotted with age. He held these hands for 40 years. Every night. Even when we fought. Even when we were angry. He always reached for my hand before we went to sleep. Vorathan looked at his own hands. They were massive, covered in scales, tipped with claws that could tear through metal. No one had ever held them. No one had ever wanted to. What does it feel like? He asked. To be loved like that? Eleanor thought about it. It feels like being home, she said finally. No matter where you are, no matter what happens, you're home because someone knows you, really knows you. All the ugly parts and the scared parts and the parts you don't show anyone else. And they stay anyway. That sounds... Vorathan searched for the word. Terrifying. It is, Eleanor agreed. It's the most terrifying thing in the world. But it's also the only thing that matters. They sat together in the little bakery as the suns moved across the sky. Eleanor talked, and Vorathan listened. She told him about David as a baby, about Maria's first steps, about the time Harold tried to make a cake and nearly burned down the kitchen. She told him about human things. Weddings and funerals. Birthdays and holidays. The way people laughed and cried and held each other through the long nights. And Vorathan, the Dragon King, the conqueror of 37 worlds, sat in a tiny chair and drank water from a tiny cup and learned what it meant to be human. When he finally left. The suns were setting. Eleanor stood at the door and watched him go. Will you come back? She asked. Vorathan paused. He looked back at her, this small old woman who had lost everything and still found a way to give. Yes, he said. I will come back. And for the first time in his long life, he meant it. The occupation of New Hearth lasted 3 years. It was the strangest occupation in the history of the Dracarin Dominion. The generals did not understand it. The soldiers did not understand it. No one understood why the Dragon King kept changing his orders. First, he reduced the work hours for human laborers. Then he protected the schools and the hospitals. Then he ordered that no more civilians would be harmed for any reason. His generals argued with him. They told him he was being weak. They told him the other conquered worlds would see and think they could rebel. Vorathan listened to them. Then he did what he wanted anyway. Every few days, he would disappear for hours. No one knew where he went. His guards would follow him to the edge of the city center, and then he would order them to stay behind. He would walk alone through the streets, past the shops and the homes and the people, who were supposed to be his property. He went to the bakery. Eleanor was always there. She was slower now, her movements more careful, her breath shorter. But she still made bread every day. She still smiled when the bell rang and Vorathan walked through the door. They would sit at the little table by the window. She would drink her coffee. He would drink his water. And they would talk. She taught him about human things. About music and art and the way people dance at weddings. About the stories parents tell their children at night. About the feeling of warm bread fresh from the oven. How it was more than just food. How it was love made solid. He told her about Dracarin things. About the red mountains of his homeworld. About the songs his people sang before battle. About his mother, who had died so long ago that he could barely remember her face, but whose voice he still heard sometimes in his dreams. For the first time in his life, Vorathan had a friend. He did not know that was what it was at first. His people did not have friends. They had allies and enemies, servants and masters. But Eleanor was none of those things. She was just Eleanor. She expected nothing from him. She feared nothing from him. She simply enjoyed his company, and he enjoyed hers. It was, he realized, the closest thing to love he had ever known. On a cold morning in the 3rd year of the occupation, Varathan came to the bakery and found it dark. The ovens were cold. The cases were empty. The bell did not ring because the door was already open, hanging loose on its hinges. A young human woman stood inside, her eyes red from crying. "She passed last night," the woman said. Her voice was rough. In her sleep. She was smiling. Varathan did not move. He stood in the doorway, too big for the frame, and felt the crack in his chest split wide open. "Who are you?" he asked. His voice did not sound like his own. "I'm her neighbor, Rosa. I've been helping her these past few months." Rosa wiped her eyes. "She asked me to give you something. If you came." She held out a piece of paper, folded small. Varathan took it in his great clawed hand. He unfolded it carefully, afraid it might break. The handwriting was worse than before. The letters were crooked and faint, but he could still read them. "Dear Varathan, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. Don't be sad. I lived a good life. A long life. I got to see my grandchildren born, even if only through pictures. I got to make bread every day in the shop my husband built. And I got to know you. I want you to understand something. When you first came to my world, I hated you. I hated you more than I have ever hated anything. You killed my son. You took my daughter. You destroyed everything I loved. But hate is heavy, and I was tired of carrying it, so I made a choice. I chose to see you not as a monster, but as a person who was lost and hungry and alone. And you know what I found? I found that I was right. You are not a monster, Varathan. You are just someone who was never taught how to love. Never taught that kindness is not weakness. Never taught that the strongest thing in the universe is not the power to destroy, but the courage to care. I don't know what you'll do after I'm gone. I don't know if anything I said made a difference. But I hope it did. I hope you remember our talks. I hope you remember the smell of bread and the sound of the bell and the way the sunlight came through the window in the afternoons. I hope you remember that a human loved you, not because you conquered her world, not because you were powerful, but because you sat in a tiny chair and drank water from a tiny cup and listened to an old woman talk about her husband. That's all any of us want, really. To be seen, to be heard, to matter to someone. You mattered to me. Now go and matter to someone else. With love. Eleanor Varathan stood in the empty bakery for a long time. Then he folded the letter and put it next to the napkin, close to his heart where he had carried it for 3 years. 1 week later, the Dragon King did something no Dracaran ruler had ever done. He called a meeting of all his generals, all his governors, all the leaders of his vast dominion, and he told them he was stepping down. The room went silent. Some thought he was joking. Some thought he had gone mad. Some reached for their weapons. But Varathan just stood there, calm and quiet, and told them the truth. "I have spent 1,200 years taking things," he said. "Worlds, lives, power. I thought that was what strength meant. I thought that was what it meant to be a king." He held up the napkin with the flowers on the corners. "A human taught me different. She taught me that real strength is not in what you can take. It is in what you can give. I do not know if our people can learn this lesson, but I know that I must try, because she believed I could, and I will not make her wrong." He released New Hearth. He released 11 other human worlds. He transmitted Eleanor's original note to every corner of the Dominion, along with a message of his own. Some followed him. Many did not. The Dominion cracked and shifted and changed in ways that would take centuries to understand. But on New Hearth, in the capital city, the bakery on the corner opened again. Rosa took it over, with Eleanor's recipes in Eleanor's oven and Eleanor's tradition. A napkin with every order. A smile for every customer, because that's what humans do. They break. They grieve, they rage, and then they make honey cakes for dragons. And sometimes, just sometimes, the dragons learn to be human too.